A black single mother knocked on the gates of Seoul's most dangerous man. What happened when she crossed his threshold didn't just shatter the silence. It tore open wounds neither of them knew could still bleed. But this isn't a story about a crying baby. It's about a woman who survived abandonment finding her voice again. It's about a man who built an empire on fear, discovering that the strongest fortress crumbles when you lock grief inside it. And it's about a motherless child whose tears would bridge two broken worlds at a cost neither parent could have foreseen. This is a story of bullets and lullabies, of blood debts and second chances, of a family born not from tradition but from the wreckage of everything they'd lost. The mansion rose at the edge of Gangnam like a tombstone. 10-foot walls topped with cameras, reinforced steel gates, armed guards who never looked away. Inside, the floors were Italian marble, the artwork worth more than most people's lives. But no amount of money could hide what this place really was. The beating heart of Kim Ha-joon's criminal empire. A fortress built to keep the world out. Tonight, it was failing. A baby's scream cut through the bulletproof glass, raw, desperate, endless. Little Ha-joon had been crying for 3 days. 3 days. And nothing had stopped it. In his office on the 3rd floor, Kim Ha-joon sat rigid behind a desk of polished obsidian. His suit jacket hung on the chair, his shirt sleeves rolled to his elbows, his tie discarded somewhere on the floor. Dark circles carved shadows beneath his eyes. Before him, security monitors flickered with images of his territory. Port shipments. Warehouse inventories. The locations of his enemies. A phone pressed to his ear, he negotiated a weapons deal in clipped Korean. His voice steady, controlled, lethal. But every time his daughter's cry pierced the soundproofing, his hand trembled on the armrest. He told himself the nanny would handle it. That's what he paid her for. 6 nannies in 3 weeks. Medical specialists. Sleep consultants. All of them useless. The crying didn't stop. If anything, it was getting worse. Weaker. Like Ha-joon was giving up. 3 walls away, in a cramped apartment that shared a property line with the estate, Faye Monroe sat at her kitchen table with her head in her hands. Her own daughter, Victoria, slept in the next room, finally at peace after hours of Faye rocking her, singing to her, pouring every ounce of strength into being enough. Being both parents. Being everything. She'd been listening to Ha-joon cry for 3 days. 3 days. The sound clawed at something primal in her chest, something she couldn't shut off no matter how hard she tried. She knew who lived next door. Everyone in the neighborhood knew. Kim Ha-joon. The monster of Seoul. The man whose name people whispered like a curse. The reaper who collected debts in blood. She told herself it wasn't her business. That getting involved with a man like that was suicide. That she had her own child to protect. But Ha-joon's cries changed. They broke. They became the sound of a baby drowning in her own despair, choking on loneliness, begging for someone, anyone, to hear her. Faye's hand stilled on the table. Her breath caught. She looked toward the thin wall that separated her world from his, her heart hammering against her ribs. Something was deeply wrong. This wasn't normal crying. This was a child dying of heartbreak. Her body moved before her mind could stop it. She grabbed her coat, kissed Victoria's forehead, whispered to her sleeping neighbor to watch her baby. She walked out into the cold Seoul night, her breath fogging in the air, her feet carrying her toward the steel gates she'd avoided for months. 2 guards materialized from the shadows, hands on their weapons. She recognized one. Jason. Young. Stone-faced. Trained to kill. I can help, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. The baby. I can make her stop crying. Jason's eyes narrowed. Ma'am, you need to leave. Now. 3 days, Faye said, stepping closer. She's been crying for 3 days, and you know it. Whatever you're doing isn't working. Her voice dropped, raw with maternal certainty. Let me try. For a moment, Jason hesitated. Then his radio crackled. A voice, sharp and exhausted. Ha-joon's voice. Who's at the gate? The neighbor, sir. The woman from. Let her in. The gates opened with a mechanical groan. Faye walked through, her pulse roaring in her ears. The courtyard was pristine. Manicured gardens. A fountain that cost more than her annual rent. Guards watched her from every angle, their expressions unreadable. She felt like prey walking into a predator's den. The front door swung open. Kim Ha-joon stood in the entrance, and Faye's breath caught. He looked nothing like the polished monster she'd imagined. His hair was disheveled, his eyes bloodshot and hollow, his shirt wrinkled. He looked like a man at war with himself. Losing. In his arms, Ha-joon wailed, her face red and swollen, her tiny fists beating against his chest. Ha-joon held her like she was made of glass and grenades, his jaw clenched so tight she could see the muscle jumping. You said you could help, he said. His voice was gravel and exhaustion. Not a question. A challenge. Faye stepped forward, close enough to see the desperation bleeding through his iron mask. Let me hold her. Ha-joon stared at her. Behind him, 2 more men watched from the shadows. Ye-joon, Hyubok. Both armed. Both waiting for Ha-joon to give an order. To make this woman disappear for daring to enter their world. Slowly, carefully, as if surrendering something irreplaceable, Ha-joon extended the baby toward Faye. The moment Ha-joon touched Faye's skin, the world stopped. The crying cut off like a severed wire. Instant. Complete. A silence so profound it felt like the earth itself held its breath. Ha-joon's tiny body softened against Faye's chest. Her breathing slowed, deepened. Her fingers uncurled from fists and grasped weakly at Faye's shirt. A soft, broken sound escaped her throat. Not a cry. A sigh. Relief. Faye looked down at the child in her arms, and something inside her shattered. This baby didn't just need comfort. She needed her mother. And her mother was gone. Just like Faye's mother had been gone. Just like Faye had been alone, abandoned, left to raise herself, and now Victoria without anyone to catch her when she fell. Tears burned hot down Faye's cheeks. She pressed her lips to Ha-joon's forehead, whispering words in a language older than any of them. Words her grandmother had whispered to her. Words that meant, you are not alone. I see you. I've got you. When she looked up, Ha-joon was staring at her. Not at the baby. At her. His expression unreadable, but something flickered behind his eyes. Something raw and unguarded and terrified. For the first time in 3 days, the fortress was silent. And in that silence everything changed. Ha-joon had held his daughter exactly 4 times before his wife died. 4 times in 2 months. He'd been in Tokyo closing a weapons deal when Ha-joon was born. In Shanghai when she smiled for the first time. In Bangkok when Ji-woo, his wife, hemorrhaged in their bedroom and bled out before the ambulance could navigate through Seoul's traffic. He'd returned to a house full of flowers and a nursery that smelled like death and baby powder. For 3 weeks, he tried. He hired the best nannies money could buy. Women with credentials from Switzerland, England, Japan. they lasted hours. Days, if they were strong. Ha-joon screamed like she knew. Like she could smell the blood on his hands, the rot in his soul. Like she was rejecting him the way everything pure and good should. The night Faye walked into his fortress, Ha-joon had been awake for 72 hours. He'd held Ha-joon against his chest, pacing the nursery floor until his legs went numb, whispering apologies in Korean that his daughter couldn't understand. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be what you need." But she just screamed. And screamed. And screamed. His men pretended not to notice. Ye-joon stood guard outside the nursery door, his face carved from granite. Hyubok handled the day-to-day operations, his eyes flickering with something Ha-joon couldn't name. Judgment, maybe. Or opportunity. The Adams Syndicate was circling like sharks who smelled blood in the water. Mike Adams had sent flowers to Ji-woo's funeral. White lilies with a card that read, "Condolences on your loss. Let's talk business soon." A threat wrapped in sympathy. Ha-joon knew what they were thinking. The monster of Seoul was weakening. Distracted. Vulnerable. A man who couldn't control a 6-pound infant couldn't control an empire. They weren't wrong. The night before Faye knocked on his gates, Ha-joon had stood in the nursery at 3 in the morning with his gun on the changing table. Not pointed at anything. Just there. A reminder that he knew 50 ways to end a life but couldn't figure out how to sustain one. Ha-joon had cried herself hoarse, her voice cracking into silence and then starting again, weaker each time. He'd picked up his phone to call someone. Anyone. But who? His parents were dead. Ji-woo's family blamed him for her death. They were right to. He was alone with a dying baby and an empire built on corpses. When Faye appeared at his gates like an answer to a prayer he didn't know how to say, Ha-joon had almost ordered Jason to turn her away. Almost. But Ha-joon had let out a sound he'd never heard before. Not a scream. A whimper. The sound of surrender. And something in Ha-joon broke. If you're listening to this and you know what it's like to hold something precious and feel it slipping through your fingers, if you've ever been so desperate you'd trust a stranger with your heart, drop a comment below and tell me where you're listening from. This story is for everyone who's ever felt like they're drowning. Now, watching Faye hold his daughter, watching Ha-joon melt into this woman's arms like she'd finally found home, Ha-joon felt something he hadn't felt since Ji-woo's funeral. Hope. And it terrified him more than any gun ever had. Faye looked up, tears streaming down her face, and for a moment they just stared at each other. Two broken people standing in the wreckage of their lives, connected by a baby who'd stopped crying for the first time in 3 days. "How did you do that?" Ha-joon's voice came out rough, barely above a whisper. Faye shook her head, cradling Ha-joon closer. "I didn't do anything. She just needed someone who understood." Understood what? Faye's eyes met his, and Ha-joon saw an ocean of pain behind them. Pain that matched his own. What it's like to lose everything and still have to keep breathing. Faye Monroe had been 7 years old when her mother left. Just walked out one Tuesday afternoon while Faye was at school and never came back. No note. No goodbye. Just an empty apartment and a social worker who smelled like cigarettes and pity. She'd spent the next 11 years in the foster system, moving from house to house, learning that love was temporary and safety was a lie people told themselves to sleep at night. She'd clawed her way out. Worked 3 jobs to put herself through community college. Met Victoria's father at a diner where she waitressed weekends. He had kind eyes and made promises about forever. Got her pregnant and disappeared before Victoria's first ultrasound. Another man who left. Another promise broken. When Victoria was born, Faye had held her daughter in that hospital room and made a vow. I will never leave you. I will be everything I never had. I will love you so much that you'll never feel the absence of anyone else. She'd moved to Seoul for a teaching job that fell through. Ended up cleaning offices at night and doing translation work during the day, barely scraping together rent for a one-bedroom apartment that shared a wall with a mansion she tried to forget existed. She'd heard the rumors. Ha-joon. The Reaper. The man who disappeared, people who crossed him. She'd seen his guards patrolling, seen black SUVs coming and going at odd hours. She kept her head down, kept Victoria close, built a life in the margins of someone else's empire. But you can't unhear a baby crying. Not when you're a mother. Not when every cell in your body is programmed to respond to that sound like it's a fire alarm wired directly to your soul. For 3 days, she'd tried to ignore it. Put headphones on Victoria. Played music. Sang louder. But Ha-joon's cries seeped through the walls like smoke, filling Faye's lungs until she couldn't breathe. On the third night, when Victoria was finally asleep and the apartment was quiet except for the muffled sound of that baby screaming, Faye had broken. She'd walked to the gates like a woman possessed. Faced down armed guards like they were nothing. Because what was death compared to listening to a child suffer? What was danger compared to the certainty that if she didn't do something, that baby would die? And Faye had already failed too many people in her life. She couldn't fail another one. Now, standing in Ha-joon's fortress with his daughter in her arms, Faye realized what she'd done. She'd walked into the lion's den. And the lion was staring at her like she'd just performed a miracle he didn't believe in. She needs to eat, Faye said quietly. And sleep. When did she last eat? Ha-joon blinked, like he'd forgotten language. The nanny tried. This morning. She wouldn't take the bottle. Show me. Ha-joon led her through the mansion, and Faye tried not to gawk. Marble floors that reflected the chandelier light like frozen water. Artwork that probably cost more than she'd earn in 10 lifetimes. Hallways that seemed to stretch forever, lined with closed doors hiding God knew what. They climbed a staircase wide enough to drive a car up, past guards stationed at every landing, past security cameras that tracked their movement like mechanical eyes. The nursery was on the 3rd floor, tucked behind a reinforced door that required a fingerprint scan to open. When Ha-joon pushed it open, Faye stepped inside and her breath caught. It was beautiful. Cream-colored walls with hand-painted clouds. A crib that looked like it belonged in a palace. Toys that had never been touched. A rocking chair positioned by a window that overlooked the city lights. Everything a baby could need. Everything except what mattered. Everything except love that knew how to hold on. The bottles are in the warmer, Ha-joon said, gesturing to a station that looked more like a laboratory than a feeding area. Formula is there. Diapers. Everything. Faye sat in the rocking chair, adjusted Ha-joon in her arms. The baby had fallen into a deep sleep, her tiny chest rising and falling in a rhythm that felt like a heartbeat Faye had been missing. She looked up at Ha-joon, this man who ruled through fear, and saw him hovering in the doorway like he didn't know if he was allowed in his own daughter's room. You can stay, Faye said softly. Ha-joon stepped inside, closed the door. He stood against the wall, hands in his pockets, watching Faye rock his daughter like he was witnessing something holy. Why did you come? He asked. Faye kept her eyes on Ha-joon. Because I'm a mother. And I couldn't listen to a baby cry anymore. You could have called someone. Child services. The police. Faye laughed, bitter and brief. You think the police come when you call about a man like you? Ha-joon flinched. It was subtle, barely there, but Faye saw it. I didn't mean that as an insult, she continued. I just meant. I knew no one else was coming. So I came. Silence settled between them, heavy and complicated. Outside, Seoul glittered like a jewel box full of secrets. Inside, a baby slept in the arms of a stranger, and a monster tried to remember how to be human. I don't know how to do this, Ha-joon said finally. I don't know how to be her father. Faye looked at him then, really looked. Saw the exhaustion carved into his face. The grief he wore like a second skin. The fear that he was trying so hard to hide. And she recognized all of it. Because she'd worn the same expression in the mirror every day for the past 3 years. Nobody knows how to be a parent, Faye said. We're all just figuring it out. Making it up as we go. Trying not to break them too badly. And if I do? Break her? Then you do what everyone else does. You apologize. You try again. You love her hard enough that the broken pieces still fit together. Ha-joon moved closer, knelt beside the rocking chair. Up close, Faye could see the silver threading through his dark hair, the scar above his left eyebrow, the way his hands trembled slightly when he reached out to touch Ha-joon's tiny fist. His daughter's fingers wrapped around his thumb, and Ha-joon made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. She's never done that before, he whispered. Held my hand. She's doing it now. They sat like that for a long time. Faye rocking. Ha-joon kneeling. Ha-joon sleeping between them like a bridge across an impossible distance. And Faye felt the walls she'd built around her heart starting to crack. If this is hitting you in the chest, if you're feeling this in your bones, hit that like button. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Because stories like this remind us that we're not alone in our brokenness. When Ha-joon woke an hour later, Faye fed her while Ha-joon watched with the intensity of a man trying to memorize a technique that might save his life. When the bottle was empty and Ha-joon was drowsy again, Faye showed him how to burp her. How to support her head. How to hold her against his shoulder and pat her back gently, rhythmically, like a heartbeat. Ha-joon burped, then sighed, then nuzzled into Ha-joon's neck. And Ha-joon looked at Faye like she'd just handed him the keys to the universe. I should go, Faye said quietly, standing. My daughter. She's with a neighbor, but. No. Ha-joon's voice was sharp. Then softer. I mean. Please. Don't go. Not yet. Faye froze. Mr. Kim. Ha-joon. Just Ha-joon. Ha-joon. I can't stay here. I have my own child. My own life. Bring her here. Faye stared. What? Ha-joon stood, still holding Ha-joon, his eyes locked on Faye's. Bring your daughter here. Move in. Both of you. I'll pay you. Whatever you need. Name your price. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious about anything in my life. Ha-joon's voice cracked. Ha-joon needs you. I need you. I know I have no right to ask. I know what I am. What people say about me. But I'm asking anyway. Please. Don't leave her. Don't leave me alone with this. Faye's heart hammered against her ribs. Every instinct screamed at her to run. To grab Victoria and disappear before this man and his world swallowed them whole. But when she looked at Ha-joon, sleeping peacefully in her father's arms for the first time in God knew how long, she saw Victoria's face. Saw every child who'd ever needed someone to stay when everyone else left. This is insane, Faye whispered. I know. I don't even know you. I know. You're a dangerous man. I know. Ha-joon stepped closer, and Faye could smell his cologne mixed with baby powder and desperation. But Ha-joon is innocent. And you're the only person who's ever been able to reach her. That has to mean something. Please, Faye. Please. Hearing her name in his mouth did something to her. Made the situation real in a way it hadn't been before. She thought about her apartment. About Victoria sleeping in a bedroom that leaked when it rained. About the translation jobs that barely covered rent and the nights Faye went to bed hungry so Victoria could have seconds. About the life she'd built from nothing and how precarious it all was. And then she thought about Ha-joon's cries. About the 3 days of listening to a baby beg for help that wasn't coming. About the look on Ha-joon's face when his daughter held his thumb. About the fact that she had the power to help. She could actually help. 1 month, Faye heard herself say. I'll stay for 1 month. You pay me enough to cover my rent and expenses. And if at any point I feel unsafe or Victoria is in danger, we leave. No questions. No consequences. Ha-joon nodded, relief flooding his features. Deal. Ye-joon will help you move your things. Tonight. Now. Now? Every minute Ha-joon has you is a minute I'm not willing to risk losing. And that's how Faye Monroe, a single mother from Chicago who'd survived abandonment and poverty and every curveball life could throw, ended up moving into a fortress built by a man called the Reaper. That's how she traded her freedom for a baby's peace. That's how she walked into a gilded cage and closed the door behind her, praying it wasn't also a coffin. Underscore 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 underscore. Moving into Ha-joon's estate was like stepping onto another planet. Faye's entire apartment could have fit inside the guest suite Ha-joon assigned her. The bedroom alone was bigger than any place she'd ever lived. King-sized bed with silk sheets. A bathroom with heated floors and a tub that could fit 4 people. A walk-in closet already stocked with clothes in her size. When she'd asked how he knew, Ha-joon had simply said, I have people who know things. It should have been comforting. Instead, it was terrifying. Victoria adjusted faster than Faye expected. At 3 years old, she saw the mansion as an adventure. A palace from the stories Faye read her at bedtime. She ran through the hallways, giggling, until Ye-joon stepped out from a doorway and she slammed into his legs. Victoria had looked up at the stern-faced guard and said, You're tall like a tree. Ye-joon's expression hadn't changed, but Faye swore she saw his lips twitch. The staff kept their distance. The maids cleaned around Faye like she was invisible. The guards tracked her movement with their eyes but never spoke. Only Jason, the young guard from the gate, occasionally nodded at her in passing. Hyubok, Ha-joon's second-in-command, watched her with unconcealed suspicion. He was older than the others, his face weathered and hard, his eyes cold. Whenever Faye entered a room where he was meeting with Ha-joon, the conversation stopped. Hyubok would stare at her like she was a virus infecting his operation. One afternoon, Faye walked into the kitchen to make Victoria lunch and found Hyubok and another man she didn't recognize standing by the counter. They stopped talking when they saw her. The stranger, American, blonde, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, looked her up and down like she was merchandise. Well, he said in English. So this is the miracle worker. Faye's skin crawled. Excuse me? Hyubok's jaw tightened. Ms. Monroe, this is Mike Adams. He's a business associate. Mike Adams. The name from Ha-joon's phone calls. The flowers at the funeral. Faye's blood ran cold. I've heard so much about you, Mike continued, moving closer. Ha-joon's been talking about nothing else. The neighbor who tamed his daughter. Who tamed him? He laughed, and it sounded like breaking glass. You must be something special. I'm just helping with the baby, Faye said evenly. Just helping. Mike's smile widened. That's sweet. Isn't that sweet, Hyubok? Hyubok said nothing. His eyes flicked to Faye, and she saw the warning there. Be careful. Mike circled her like a predator. Here's the thing about helping, Ms. Monroe. In our world, nothing is ever just anything. Every action has a reaction. Every alliance has a cost. And Ha-joon. He leaned in close enough that Faye could smell whiskey on his breath. Ha-joon has been very distracted lately. Making mistakes. Missing meetings. Going soft. He said the last word like a curse. That's dangerous. For everyone. I don't know anything about Ha-joon's business, Faye said, forcing her voice to stay steady. No? Then why are you here? In his home? With his daughter? Women like you don't just walk into places like this unless they want something. I want to help a baby. That's all. Mike laughed. God, you almost sound like you believe that. He straightened, adjusted his cuffs. I like you, Ms. Monroe. You've got spine. But you should know what you've walked into. Ha-joon's empire is crumbling. His enemies are circling. And you. He tapped her shoulder with one finger. You're the crack in the foundation. The weakness everyone's been waiting for. Before Faye could respond, Ha-joon's voice cut through the kitchen like a blade. Get out. Mike turned, his smile never faltering. Ha-joon. We were just getting acquainted with your houseguest. Ha-joon stood in the doorway, and Faye barely recognized him. This wasn't the exhausted father from the nursery. This was the monster of Seoul. His eyes were black ice. His voice was death. Touch her again and I'll cut your hand off. Get out. Mike held up his hands in mock surrender. Easy, brother. Just making conversation. He walked past Ha-joon, paused at the door. Think about what I said. About the shipment. About loyalty. About what happens when a king forgets his crown. Then he was gone. Hyubok followed without a word, leaving Faye and Ha-joon alone in the kitchen. Ha-joon's chest was heaving, his fists clenched so tight his knuckles were white. Are you okay? He asked, not looking at her. I'm fine. Who was that? Someone I should have dealt with a long time ago. Ha-joon finally met her eyes, and Faye saw rage there. And fear. I'm sorry. He shouldn't have spoken to you like that. He shouldn't have been here at all. Ha-joon, what's going on? He ran a hand through his hair, suddenly looking exhausted again. Human again. Nothing you need to worry about. If I'm living here, if my daughter is living here, I need to know if we're safe. You're safe. I promise you, I will never let anyone hurt you or Victoria. But his promise felt hollow. Because Faye had seen the way Mike Adams looked at her. Like she was a tool. A weapon. Something to be used against Ha-joon. And she'd seen the way Hyubok watched from the shadows, calculating, measuring, waiting. That night, after Victoria was asleep and Ha-joon was fed and drowsy, Faye found Ha-joon in the nursery. He was sitting in the rocking chair, holding his daughter, staring at nothing. She'd never seen anyone look so alone. "Do you want me to take her?" Faye asked quietly from the doorway. Ha-joon shook his head. "No. I've got her. I think I'm starting to get the hang of this." Faye stepped inside, sat on the ottoman beside the chair. "You're doing better than you think." "I heard her laugh today." Ha-joon's voice was full of wonder. "Just for a second. When you were singing to her. I didn't know babies could laugh." "They can. When they feel safe." Ha-joon looked at Faye, then really looked, and the walls between them felt thinner. "Thank you. For staying. For not running when you had every reason to. I almost did. After Mike left. I wouldn't have blamed you." They sat in the near darkness, the city glowing beyond the window, the baby breathing between them. Faye thought about her apartment. About the life she'd left behind. About the life she was building in this impossible place with this impossible man. And she thought about Victoria, sleeping down the hall in a room bigger than any dream Faye had ever dared to dream. "Can I ask you something?" Faye said. "Anything." "Do you love her?" Ha-joon. "Do you love your daughter?" Ha-joon was quiet for so long Faye thought he wasn't going to answer. Then, barely a whisper, "I don't know if I know how to love anyone. I don't know if I'm capable of it. My wife used to say I had ice where my heart should be. That I chose this life over her. Over everything." His voice broke. "She wasn't wrong. But you're here. Right now. Holding your daughter. Learning how to feed her. That's love, Ha-joon. Even if you don't recognize it yet." Ha-joon's eyes glistened in the dim light. "What if it's not enough? What if I fail her the way I failed her mother?" Faye reached out, placed her hand over his where it cradled Ha-joon's back. "Then you get up and you try again. That's what parents do. We fail and we try and we fail and we try. And somewhere in all that trying, we figure out how to be what they need." Ha-joon turned his hand over, lacing his fingers with Faye's. It was the first time they'd touched since that first night. And Faye felt electricity shoot through her, dangerous and inevitable. This wasn't part of the plan. She wasn't supposed to feel anything for this man. Wasn't supposed to see him as anything but a means to an end, a way to keep Victoria safe and fed. But here, in the darkness, with his daughter sleeping and his guard down and his hand in hers, Faye saw something she hadn't expected to find. She saw herself. Broken and trying. Failing and trying. Loving despite not knowing how. And God help her, it was the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. Outside the nursery, in the shadows of the hallway, Hubok stood with his phone pressed to his ear. His voice was low, barely audible. "Yes. She's with him now. In the nursery. Holding hands like teenagers." A pause. "I understand. When do you want to move?" Another pause. Then a smile that would have chilled Faye's blood if she'd seen it. "Perfect. The Reaper won't know what hit him." He ended the call, pocketed the phone, and walked away. In the nursery, a baby slept. A mother who wasn't a mother held hands with a killer who wanted to be a father. And the fortress walls, so carefully built, began to crack. If you're still here, if you've made it this far, drop a comment and tell me, have you ever trusted someone you knew you shouldn't? Have you ever walked into danger for the right reasons? Because Faye just did. And nothing will ever be the same. The morning started with sunshine, and that alone felt like a miracle. For the first time since Faye moved into the fortress, Ha-joon announced he was taking the day off. No meetings. No phone calls. No men in dark suits arriving with briefcases full of blood money. Just a day. One ordinary, impossible day. I want to take you somewhere, he'd said over breakfast, Ha-joon cooing contentedly in Faye's arms while Victoria pushed scrambled eggs around her plate. All of you. As a family. Faye's heart had stuttered on that word. Family. Like it was something they already were instead of something they were playing at. Like the four of them sitting at this table eating toast together was normal instead of the most dangerous thing Faye had ever done. Where? Victoria had asked, her eyes lighting up the way they always did when Ha-joon paid attention to her. In the past weeks, he'd started reading to her at bedtime. Teaching her Korean words. Letting her paint his nails with glitter polish that he wore to meetings without shame. Faye had watched her daughter fall in love with this man the way children do. Completely, trustingly, without reservation. And it terrified her. It's a surprise, Ha-joon had said, reaching over to ruffle Victoria's curls. The gesture was so casual, so paternal, that Faye had to look away before the tears came. They took one car instead of the usual convoy. Ha-joon drove himself, which Yi-joon protested until Ha-joon shut him down with a look. Just one car. Just the four of them. Like a real family on a real outing instead of a crime lord and the woman he'd hired to love his daughter. The Han River stretched before them like liquid silver, and Ha-joon pulled into a park Faye had never seen before. Not the touristy spots crowded with couples and street vendors. This was different. Quiet. A hidden garden tucked away from the world, where cherry blossoms rained down like snow and the only sounds were birds and children's laughter from somewhere distant. Ha-joon lifted Ha-joon from her car seat with practiced ease now, his movements confident where they'd once been terrified. Faye watched him press a kiss to his daughter's forehead, watched Ha-joon's tiny hand reach up to grab his nose, watched this man who killed for a living melt into something soft and unguarded. And she felt her walls crumbling, felt herself falling into something she couldn't name and couldn't stop. Victoria ran ahead, chasing butterflies, her laughter echoing through the trees. Faye moved to follow but Ha-joon caught her hand. His fingers laced through hers like they belonged there, like they'd been holding hands for years instead of weeks. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? For this. For her. He nodded toward Ha-joon. For not giving up on us when you should have. Faye's throat tightened. Ha-joon. I know we're not real, he continued, his voice rough. I know this is temporary. That you're here because I'm paying you. Because Ha-joon needs you. But standing here right now, watching Victoria play and holding you and my daughter, I can almost pretend that we're just a family. That I'm just a man who gets to have this. Faye turned to face him fully, her heart hammering. What if you're not pretending? Ha-joon's breath caught. His eyes searched hers, and Faye saw everything there. The longing. The fear. The desperate hope of a man who'd spent his whole life building walls discovering that he wanted them torn down. Faye, The bullet shattered the moment before he could finish. Glass exploded. Ha-joon's windshield spiderwebbed and collapsed. Faye heard Victoria scream, heard the engine roar, heard Ha-joon shouting her name as he shoved Ha-joon into her arms and threw his body over both of them. The world became chaos. Gunfire, screeching tires, Ha-joon's heartbeat against Faye's ear as he pressed her down into the grass. Victoria! Faye screamed, trying to lift her head, but Ha-joon held her down with iron strength. Stay down, he roared, and his voice was the reaper now, no trace of the gentle father who'd kissed his daughter's forehead moments before. More gunshots. Faye heard them ping off metal, heard them thud into tree trunks, heard them whistle past close enough to feel death breathing on her neck. Ha-joon was shrieking, Victoria was crying somewhere Faye couldn't see, and all she could do was lie there pinned beneath Ha-joon's body while the world tried to kill them. Then, as suddenly as it started, it stopped. Silence crashed down like a physical weight. Ha-joon lifted his head cautiously, his gun in his hand. When had he drawn it, his eyes scanning, calculating? Victoria, Faye gasped, and Ha-joon released her. Faye scrambled to her feet, Ha-joon clutched to her chest, and found her daughter huddled behind a stone bench 20 feet away. Unharmed. Sobbing but alive. Faye ran to her, dropped to her knees, pulled Victoria into her arms with her free hand. "I've got you, baby. I've got you. You're okay. You're okay." But Victoria wasn't okay. None of them were okay. Because this wasn't okay. This was what Faye had been terrified of since the moment she walked through those gates. This was the reality of loving a man whose enemies measured revenge in bullets and blood. If you're listening to this with your heart in your throat, if you've ever held your child and realized you'd put them in danger, tell me in the comments. Because Faye's about to make a choice that will break her. And maybe you'll understand why. Ha-joon was on his phone, his voice cold and clipped, barking orders in Korean. Within minutes, 3 black SUVs surrounded them. Ye-joon appeared like a ghost, his face grim, his gun drawn. Other guards fanned out, securing the perimeter, checking for threats. "Get them home," Ha-joon said to Ye-joon now. "Sir, you need to come." "I'm not going home." Ha-joon's eyes were empty. "Dead." "I'm going hunting." Faye's blood ran cold. She stood, still holding both girls, and faced him. "Ha-joon, no. Come with us. Please. They tried to kill my family." Each word fell like a stone into a grave. "They die tonight." "You can't." "I can. I will." He looked at her, and Faye barely recognized him. "Take the girls. Keep them safe. I'll handle this." "By doing what? By killing people? By becoming the monster everyone says you are?" Ha-joon flinched like she'd slapped him. "I've always been a monster, Faye. You just forgot for a little while." He walked away before she could respond, climbed into an SUV with Kubok and 2 other men, and disappeared into Seoul's labyrinth. Leaving Faye standing in a garden full of bullet holes and shattered glass, holding 2 crying children and the ruins of her foolish heart. The mansion felt different when they returned. Colder. The guards moved with military precision, checking every room, every window, every shadow. Ye-joon stationed men at every entrance. The illusion of safety Faye had been building shattered like Ha-joon's windshield. She put the girls to bed together, in Faye's room where she could keep watch. Victoria clung to her like she might disappear. Ha-joon wouldn't stop crying, her little body trembling with fear she was too young to understand but old enough to feel. Faye sang to them both, old songs her grandmother had taught her, songs about safety and love and promises that felt like lies in her mouth. When they finally slept, Faye sat on the floor beside the bed and let herself break. She cried silently, shoulders shaking, hands pressed over her mouth to keep the sobs from waking the children. What had she done? What had she brought Victoria into? She'd been so desperate to help, so desperate to prove she wasn't like her mother who'd abandoned her, that she'd walked them both straight into a war zone. She heard Ha-joon return at 3 a.m. Heard the heavy footsteps, the low voices, the sound of running water. She found him in the bathroom connected to his suite, washing blood from his hands. His knuckles were split. His shirt was gone. And his eyes, God, his eyes looked like they'd seen the end of the world. Did you kill them? Faye asked from the doorway. Ha-joon didn't look up. Yes. All of them? Every single one. He scrubbed at his hands like he could wash away more than blood. Mike Adams is dead. His entire operation is ash. Anyone who knew about today, anyone who gave the order, anyone who pulled a trigger. Dead. Faye's stomach churned. Ha-joon. You were right. He finally met her eyes in the mirror, and the pain there made Faye want to look away. I am a monster. I went to their homes. I made them watch. I made them beg. And then I killed them anyway. His voice cracked. Because they threatened my family. Because they made my daughter cry. Because they could have taken you from me and I. He slammed his fist into the marble counter, and Faye heard something crack. I can't lose you. I won't. You're scaring me, Faye whispered. Ha-joon turned to face her fully, and Faye saw the truth written across his devastated face. This was who he was. Who he'd always been. A man who solved problems with violence. Who protected what he loved by destroying everything else. And no amount of gentle moments in nurseries or butterfly-filled gardens could change that. I know, he said. I know I scare you. I know you're going to leave. I can see it in your eyes. You're already planning how to pack, where to go, how to disappear. His voice broke. But before you do, I need you to know something. I love you. I'm in love with you. With everything you are. With how you love my daughter. With how you made me remember I'm human. With your strength and your stubbornness and the way you look at me like I might be capable of good. Tears streamed down Faye's face. Don't. I know I have no right. I know loving me is dangerous. I know I can't ask you to stay. But I'm asking anyway. He crossed to her, dropped to his knees, and Faye saw the Reaper of Seoul kneeling before her like a man at confession. Stay. Please. Not because I'm paying you. Not because Ha-joon needs you. But because I need you. Because I love you. Because without you, I'm just a monster drowning in blood. Faye's heart was shattering. Because she loved him too. God help her, she'd fallen in love with this broken, violent, impossible man. She loved the way he held his daughter. The way he read to Victoria. The way he looked at Faye like she was salvation. But love wasn't enough. Love couldn't stop bullets. Love couldn't change what he was. I can't, Faye sobbed. I can't stay. Not after today. Not knowing that any moment someone might come for us. That Victoria might, she couldn't finish. Couldn't say the words. Ha-joon's face crumbled. I understand. I'm sorry. Don't be. He stood, stepped back, gave her space. You're doing what any mother would do. What any sane person would do. I'm the one who's sorry. For being selfish enough to ask you to stay. For thinking I could have this. Have you? Faye turned to leave, but Ha-joon's voice stopped her. I'll have Ye-joon arrange security for you. Wherever you go. For as long as you need. You and Victoria will be safe. I promise you that. And somehow, that promise hurt most of all. Because even now, even broken and rejected, Ha-joon was trying to protect them. Because underneath the monster was a man who loved with everything he had. And Faye was walking away from him. She made it 3 steps down the hallway before Ha-joon's screaming started. Faye ran. Burst into her room to find Victoria sitting up in bed, terrified, and Ha-joon shrieking in her portable crib with a sound Faye hadn't heard since those first 3 days. Pure, inconsolable despair. Faye scooped her up, tried everything she knew, but Ha-joon wouldn't stop. Wouldn't calm. Just screamed and screamed like her heart was breaking. Because it was. Because somehow, this 6-month-old baby knew. Knew Faye was leaving. Knew her world was shattering again. Knew that love was temporary and safety was a lie and everyone eventually leaves. Ha-joon appeared in the doorway, his face stricken. What's wrong? Is she hurt? She knows, Faye gasped through her own tears. She knows I'm leaving. Ha-joon crossed to them, and the moment his hand touched Ha-joon's back, the baby turned her face into Faye's neck and wailed harder. A sound of pure loss. Of abandonment. Of a motherless child losing the only mother she'd known. And Faye felt something inside her crack wide open. Because she'd been this child once. Had screamed into the void when her mother left. Had learned too young that people you love disappear. She'd promised herself she'd never make another child feel that way. Never be the person who leaves. But here she was. Doing to Ha-joon exactly what had been done to her. Choosing safety over love. Choosing survival over staying. Becoming her mother in the worst possible way. Comment below if you've ever had to choose between love and safety. If you've ever known what it's like to leave someone you love because staying might destroy you. Because Faye's choice is about to change everything. The attack came 2 weeks later, and Faye almost missed it. She'd stayed. God help her, she'd stayed. After that night with Ha-joon screaming, after seeing her own abandonment reflected in that baby's tears, after Ha-joon had held them both and promised he'd die before he let anything hurt them again, Faye had unpacked her bags. Made a different choice. Chose to stay in the danger because leaving felt like dying. Ha-joon had been different after that. Softer. More present. He'd cut back his operations, delegated more to Ye-joon, spent his evenings in the nursery teaching Ha-joon to grab his fingers and reading Victoria stories about dragons and princesses. He'd started teaching Faye Korean words, laughing when she butchered the pronunciation, his eyes warm in ways that made Faye's chest ache. They hadn't talked about love again. Hadn't defined what they were to each other. But sometimes, late at night when the girls were sleeping, Ha-joon would find Faye in the library and they'd sit together in silence that felt like conversation. He'd reach for her hand and she'd let him, and the weight of his palm against hers felt like the closest thing to peace Faye had ever known. She should have known it couldn't last. The explosion started at midnight. Faye woke to the sound of the world ending, gunfire, screaming, something massive detonating near the south wall. She grabbed Victoria, who was sleeping in Faye's bed now, always within reach. Ran to the nursery for Ha-joon. Found Ha-joon already there, his face grim, Ha-joon clutched to his chest. Get to the safe room, he ordered, pressing Ha-joon into Faye's arms. Now. What's happening? They're here. All of them. Every enemy I've ever made. His jaw was iron. Hubok's been feeding them information for months. He let them in. This is his play for the Empire. Faye's blood turned to ice. Where is he? Doesn't matter. All that matters is getting you out. Ha-joon cupped Faye's face, kissed her hard and desperate. There's a tunnel in the basement. Behind the wine cellar. Ye-joon knows. He'll get you to the safe house. Promise me you'll run. Promise me you won't stop. I'm not leaving you. Faye. I'm not leaving you. Faye's voice broke. Not again. I'm done running. Done choosing safety over the people I love. We're in this together or not at all. Another explosion rocked the mansion. Plaster rained from the ceiling. Somewhere below, men were shouting, dying, fighting. And Ha-joon looked at Faye like she'd just given him something he'd never dared hope for. The safe room is reinforced steel, he said quickly. Third door past the library. Code is 0-4-1-5. Ha-joon's birthday. Lock yourselves in. Don't open it for anyone but me or Ye-joon. No one else. Promise me. Faye nodded, clutching both girls. Promise me you'll come back. Ha-joon kissed her again, softer this time. Kissed Victoria's forehead. Pressed his lips to Ha-joon's tiny hand. I love you, he whispered. All of you. And I will burn this world down before I let them take my family. Then he was gone, running toward the sound of gunfire, and Faye was running the opposite direction with 2 crying children and a heart that might explode from fear. The safe room was exactly where Ha-joon said it would be. Faye punched in the code with shaking hands. 0-4-1-5, Ha-joon's birthday, the most important date in Ha-joon's life, and the steel door hissed open. Inside was a small room lined with supplies. Water. Food. Medical equipment. Weapons. And a monitor showing security feeds from throughout the mansion. Faye locked the door behind her, set the girls down, and stared at the screens. Watched Ha-joon and his men fighting like demons. Watched Kyubok leading the assault, his face twisted with rage and ambition. Watched bodies fall. Watched her world burn. Victoria pressed against Faye's side, her eyes huge. Is Ha-joon going to die? No, baby. He's going to be fine. But Faye didn't know if she was lying. Didn't know if any of them would survive this. She watched Ha-joon take a bullet to the shoulder, keep fighting. Watched Ye-joon go down, blood blooming across his chest. Watched the enemy close in from all sides like wolves sensing wounded prey. Then she saw it. On the monitor showing the hallway outside the safe room. Kyubok. Walking toward them with 3 armed men. He knew where they were. Of course he knew. He'd probably designed this room. Faye's mind raced. The door would hold. Ha-joon had promised. Reinforced steel. Military grade. But there were vents. And she could hear them now, footsteps getting closer, voices speaking in Korean she couldn't understand but whose intent was crystal clear. She looked at the weapons mounted on the wall. At her daughters huddled in the corner. At the choice before her, hide and pray, or fight. Faye Monroe had been running her whole life. From poverty. From abandonment. From danger. From love. But standing in that steel room with everything she'd ever cared about at her back, Faye was done running. She grabbed a gun from the wall. Checked the clip the way she'd seen Ha-joon do 1,000 times. Her hands were steady. Her breathing was calm. And when Kyubok's voice came through the door, Ms. Monroe, open up and I'll make this quick. Make me work for it and I'll make you watch your daughters die first. Faye didn't hesitate. She disabled the lock. Stepped back. Raised the gun. And when that door swung open and Kyubok stepped through with his smug smile and his bloody hands, Faye shot him. Not center mass like the movies. Not some kill shot that would end him quick. She shot him in the kneecap, and Kyubok screamed and went down. His men raised their weapons but Faye was faster. One shot, two, both center mass because she wasn't taking chances with these ones. They dropped. Hyubok writhed on the floor, clutching his shattered knee, his eyes wide with shock. You shot me. You threatened my children. Faye's voice was ice. Did you think I wouldn't? She kicked his gun away, stood over him with her weapon trained on his head. Behind her, Victoria was crying but Ha-joon was silent, and Faye could feel her daughters watching. Learning. Seeing their mother become someone she'd never thought she could be. Ha-joon was weak, Hyubok spat. You made him weak. A man like that doesn't deserve to rule. You're right, Faye said. He was becoming weak. Becoming human. Becoming someone who loves instead of just kills. And you couldn't stand it. Couldn't stand that he found something worth protecting more than an empire. She heard footsteps. Turned to see Ha-joon in the doorway, blood-covered but alive, his eyes locked on Faye holding a gun over his betrayer. Ye-joon was with him, wounded but upright, and behind them the sounds of fighting had stopped. It's over, Ha-joon said quietly. They're all dead. Faye lowered the gun. Started shaking. Ha-joon crossed to her, took the weapon gently from her hands, pulled her into his arms. She collapsed against him, and he held her while she broke apart. Held her while she sobbed. Held her like she was the most precious thing in the world. I killed them, Faye gasped. I killed. You protected our children, Ha-joon corrected. You saved their lives. You saved all of us. He pulled back enough to look at her face, and Faye saw something new in his eyes. Not just love. Respect. Partnership. Recognition of an equal. I told you once I didn't know how to love anyone, Ha-joon said. But you taught me. You showed me what it means to fight for family. To choose people over power. To be brave enough to stay even when leaving is safer. His voice cracked. You're the strongest person I've ever known. And if you'll have me, broken, bloody, impossible me, I want to spend the rest of my life learning how to be the man you deserve. Faye couldn't speak. Could only nod through her tears. Could only kiss him like he was air and she was drowning. Could only hold on while the fortress burned around them and their daughters watched and a new kind of family was forged in the ashes of everything they'd destroyed to protect it. If this story has broken you open, if you're crying right now, drop a comment and share where you are. Share who you're thinking of. Because this is the part where broken people choose to be whole together. And maybe that's what we're all looking for. 3 months later, the fortress was rebuilt. New walls. New guards. New systems. But more than that, new life. Faye woke to morning light streaming through windows that no longer needed to be bulletproof because Ha-joon had dismantled half his empire. Sold off the drug operations. Handed the weapons trade to Ye-joon with instructions to go legitimate. Kept only the businesses that didn't cost lives. It made him less powerful. Made him vulnerable in ways that terrified his remaining rivals. But it also made him free. Victoria ran into their bedroom. Their bedroom, because Faye had moved into Ha-joon's suite a month ago and refused to leave, with Ha-joon toddling behind her. 10 months old now and walking like a drunken sailor. Both girls climbed onto the bed, giggling, and Ha-joon groaned dramatically. It's 6 a.m, he mumbled into his pillow. Daddy, you promised pancakes. Victoria demanded, bouncing on his back. Daddy. Faye's heart clenched every time she heard it. Ha-joon had cried the first time Victoria called him that. Had scooped her up and held her so tight Faye thought he might never let go. Now he rolled over, Ha-joon shrieking with delight as he lifted her high above his head. Did I promise pancakes? Yes, both girls chorused. I don't remember promising pancakes. Daddy. He looked at Faye over their daughters' heads, both their daughters now, because Faye had asked if he wanted to adopt Victoria and Ha-joon had said yes before she'd finished the question, and his smile was pure joy. "What do you think, beautiful? Did I promise pancakes?" "You absolutely did," Faye confirmed, her own smile matching his. "Well then. Pancakes it is." They went downstairs together, all four of them, and Faye felt the weight of everything they'd survived. Every bullet. Every betrayal. Every moment of terror and choice. All of it had led here. To this kitchen. To Ha-joon flipping pancakes while Victoria and Ha-joon finger-painted at the table. To Faye leaning against the counter with coffee in her hands and peace in her heart. Later, when the girls were napping and the mansion was quiet, Ha-joon found Faye in the library. Their library. Where he'd first started reaching for her hand all those months ago. "I have something for you," he said. He pulled out a small box, and Faye's breath caught. But it wasn't a ring. It was a key. "It's to the house down by the Han River," Ha-joon explained. "The park where we went that day. Before everything went to hell. I bought the property. All of it. The garden. The cherry trees. Everything." He pressed the key into her palm. "I want to build something there. Not a fortress. Just a home. A place where our girls can run and play without guards watching every move. Where we can be a family without all of this." He gestured to the mansion around them. "What do you think?" Faye looked at the key. At this man who'd given up an empire for love. At the future he was offering. And she felt tears streaming down her face again because she'd cried more in the past 6 months than she had in her entire life, but these were different tears. These were happy. "I think," Faye said slowly, "that you're the most ridiculous, impossible, wonderful man I've ever known. And yes. Let's build a home." Ha-joon pulled her close, buried his face in her neck. "I love you," he whispered. "I love you so much it scares me." "Good," Faye whispered back. "Love should scare you. That's how you know it's real." They stood like that for a long time, two broken people who'd found each other in the worst possible way and chosen to build something beautiful anyway. A family born not from tradition or expectation but from tears and gunfire, and two motherless children who'd needed them to be brave enough to stay. And somewhere in the nursery, Ha-joon woke from her nap and didn't cry. Because she wasn't alone anymore. Because she had a father who'd learned how to love her. A mother who'd chosen her. A sister who held her hand. A family that had been shattered and rebuilt into something stronger than blood. If you made it to the end of this story, if you're sitting there with tears in your eyes understanding that love is messy and dangerous and worth every terrifying moment, do me a favor. Share this with someone who needs to know that broken families can be whole. That monsters can learn to be human. That sometimes the bravest thing we can do is stay when everything in us says run. Comment where you're watching from. Tell me your story. Because we're all just trying to figure out how to love each other through the impossible. And maybe that's enough. Maybe that's everything. The monster of Seoul became a father. A single mother became a warrior. Two broken souls became a family. And in a mansion that used to be a fortress, for hearts beat as one. Imperfect. Dangerous. Absolutely, impossibly, beautifully real. This is their story. But maybe it's yours too.